financial.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dudar, thank you for appearing here today, and thank you again for the quality of the work of the GAO. I find the reports to be helpful, comprehensive. In the report that I have before me, there is a short discussion, I guess, of our history of our financial regulatory system, a number of observations you have for the framework for this panel and Congress and other policymakers going forward. What I don't necessarily see, though, is an analysis from GAO on the significant but-for factors that has led us to the economic turmoil that we see today. I think we're all the believers of the adage that those who do not learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. So am I missing that from this work? That was that not in the scope of the work, or has GAO come to some conclusions about the primary but-for causes of our present economic turmoil?
Well, the report does focus on some of the developments that have happened in the financial marketplace that have challenged the regulators, but it is not within the scope of it to talk about all the underlying economic situations that have gone before that. I'd ask if my colleague, Ms. Williams, could elaborate on that.
No, I think it's accurate that we did not specifically set out in this report to lay out the reasons for the current economic turmoil in the market. We simply use this as an additional data point in addition to other problems that have existed in the market over several decades to illustrate this is yet another example that points to serious questions about the regulatory structure.
In dealing with the issue of consumer protection, on page 18 of your report, you state many consumers that received loans in the last few years did not understand the risk associated with taking out their loans. After first being elected as a member of Congress, my wife and I purchased what we refer to as an old, expensive condominium in the Alexandria area. My 5- and 6-year-old refer to it as the itty-bitty teeny tiny house. When faced with the real estate closure of that condominium, I remember being given a voluminous amount of documents, almost none of which I've read, notwithstanding the fact that I've actually had a short and illustrious legal career and to read that stuff at one time. I remember asking a real estate agent who actually reads this stuff, and the answer was about 1 out of 100 home purchasers. I said, well, who's the one? And they stated a first-year law student at one of the local law schools. My question is, should consumers know what mortgage products that they sign, and can they know? Is there a concept, is it possible for regulators to promote effective disclosure, again, as opposed to what I would refer to as voluminous disclosure? Has the GAO concluded that consumers can and should understand the risk associated with their mortgage product?
We've made a number of recommendations, and I'll ask Mr. Hillman to elaborate on those in a series of products over time about making the disclosures more understandable to consumers. There's ways to do research on this, to do some testing as to what the consumers would really understand and put in place. As I've also grown to some of the disclosures are in, as you mentioned, a teeny tiny condominium are in teeny tiny print, so they're even hard to read. But there are a number of ways that we and I recommend as disclosures could be improved over time. And I also, though, would not also overlook the issue of financial literacy training to a population at large over a period of time.
I see my time's winding down. I'd like to try to squeeze in at least one more question here. Did the GAO look at the enforcement mechanisms that are in place to deal with mortgage fraud? According to FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, mortgage fraud has increased something along the lines of 1,400% in this decade. A lot of predatory lending, frankly, a lot of predatory borrowing. I think according to FinCEN, a majority of the mortgage fraud occurred from borrowers misrepresenting their income, misrepresenting their assets, misrepresenting their occupancy. Anecdotally, I've spoken with a number of U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys. They're focused on terrorism. Unless you're in the 7 and 8 figures fraud, they don't even look at it. So has the GAO undertaken a look at what would it mean to simply enforce some of the anti-fraud regulations that are on the books today?
We're out of time, so I'm just going to ask you to limit yourself to just a sentence on this if you could, or Mr. Hillman.
I'd be pleased to respond, and your question again is right on target. We have not done any specific look as it relates to the elements of mortgage fraud and the growing nature of that, but we have recently completed 2 pieces of work in the Bank Secrecy Act area, which looks at the extent to which depository institutions are preparing suspicious activity reports and currency transaction reports to help law enforcement agencies tackle that problem and try to determine the most efficient means for depository institutions to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Silvers?
Again, let me express my thanks to the GAO for your assistance to our panel in